Hey folks, this is Rhykker, bringing you a Diablo 3 patch 2.41 Witch Doctor build guide for the Helltooth set. We're looking at a gargantuan pet build. I was originally toying around with this build back on the PTR when I saw it topping the Witch Doctor Greater Rift leaderboards with mid 90 clears. Of course, that was with optimized gear and hundreds and thousands of paragon levels, but the gameplay we're showing right now is a 75 clear with relatively low paragon level, unoptimized gear, and legendary gems that aren't even leveled up very high. Why is 75 an important Greater Rift? Because it's one of the conquests that you have the option to do if you want to progress along your season journey and unlock your additional stash tab. This build let me clear 75 with little difficulty, and you see all the top Witch Doctor players on the Greater Rift leaderboards using this build as well. We'll go over the skills, the gear, and the gameplay. And if you want to know more about this build or Witch Doctors in general, I encourage you guys to check out two content creators, one named JMac, one named Big Daddy Den. Those guys do some great work in the Witch Doctor community, so be sure to give those guys some love. For this build, you will need the full 6-piece bonus of the Helltooth set. The 2-set bonus basically will allow us to apply a debuff to enemies. While it does deal some amount of damage to them over time, what's more important is that increased damage that they'll be taking. The 4-piece bonus is essential to survival. After applying necrosis to an enemy, which will be basically whenever you hit or whenever you cast Wall of Death, you take 60% less damage for 10 seconds. It'll be critical to have this buff up at all times. And lastly, the 6-piece bonus gives us a huge damage buff after casting Wall of Death. Now you'll note that I only have 5 of the 6 pieces of Helltooth equipped. That's because in our Kanai's cube, we have a Ring of Royal Grandeur. This ring is non-negotiable, as are many of the gear slots, but we will go over what options you do have. Our armor piece in Kanai's cube is the Mask of Jerem. You could either put the Mask of Jerem here, or Tasker and Theo. If you put Tasker and Theo, you'll then wear your Mask of Jerem instead of a Helltooth mask, and equip the Helltooth gloves. How do you decide which to cube? Really, it all depends on whether you have a better rolled Tasker and Theo, or a better rolled Mask of Jerem. You want to factor in both the primary stats on the item, as well as their special secondary power. Tasker and Theo's increased attack speed for pets, and the Mask of Jerem's increased damage of pets are so important, and you want those to be as close to 100% as possible. Another key piece of this build is the Short Man's Finger. This is a ring that will be the major source of your damage. Instead of having 1 gargantuan, you'll have 3. And your gargantuans are dealing the vast majority of your damage. For your bracers, Lakumba's ornament will keep you alive. These pair well with Sacred Harvester. Again, this is another essential piece of gear for this build. You want to try to have 10 stacks of Soul Harvest up at all times. Normally you can only have a max of 5, but Sacred Harvester changes that to 10. Not only will that give you the normal buffs of Soul Harvest, but with Lakumba's ornament, with a full 10 stack, you'll have 60% damage reduction. Again, essential for pushing the high Greater Rifts. The weapon we'll want in our cube is the Furnace. We primarily want to be elite hunting, and this will really help end those fights quicker. For your offhand, you have a choice of 2. You have the adorable little Henry's Perquisition, or you have the Eucapian Serpent. On the PTR, it was Henry's Perquisition that was topping the leaderboards with mid 90 Greater Rift clears. But now that patch 2.41 has gone live, we've seen the emergence of the Eucapian Serpent as well. It is currently the top, but there's a pretty even split amongst the top 10 between the Eucapian Serpent and Henry's Perquisition. My recommendation would be to try out both, or ideally go with whichever one rolled better for you. Henry's Perquisition has a powerful effect, but it's very short-lived, whereas the Eucapian Serpent has a weaker effect, but that applies at all times. Again, it's not clear which is superior, so feel free to try out both. For your belt, we'll want to max out our damage, so we want a Witching Hour. It's also important to note that attack speed is important to this build. This will buff our pet damage, and the Witching Hour rolls with both attack speed and crit damage, making it a very powerful belt option. While not absolutely mandatory to the build, it will help bring a lot of damage. And we round out the build with the Endless Walk set. the Traveler's Pledge Amulet, and the compass rose ring. While you're moving around, you take up to 50% less damage, and while you're standing still, you can deal up to double damage. In play, you ideally want to be maximizing the amount of time that you stand still. That's why it's so important to stack all these various sources of damage reduction. You will notice, however, in my play that I'm a little skittish, particularly once I've popped Spirit Vessel and no longer have a free life. If you play a little more confidently, you will be able to deal more damage. We'll get back to the specifics of what rolls you want on your gear pieces in just a second, but we're going to turn to the skills now. First, you'll want Summon Zombie Dogs, Leeching Beasts. This is because life on hit will be important to this build. Getting life on hit on your gear with the zombie dogs is a difference between having decent sustain and no sustain. With life on hit and leeching beasts, you can be brought down to 20% health and quickly get back to full health just off of life on hit. The damage these dogs bring is insignificant. What's most important is their life on hit. Gargantuan Humongoid is where the damage comes. And most importantly is their cleave damage. That means they don't just apply their damage to a single target, but they apply it in an area in front of them. That's why we want Piranha's Piranado. This does a great job of clumping enemies together so that your Gargantuans can get to work on them, dealing that sweet, sweet area damage. Wall of Death communing with spirits is our bread and butter. Not only does it make enemies deal less damage to you, but it chills them, thus allowing you to benefit from your Bane of the Trapped gem. And of course, our entire Helltooth set revolves around this skill. Note that it has an 8-second cooldown, and the Helltooth 2-piece and 4-piece buffs last for 10 seconds. This means you have no excuse to not have 100% uptime on that 4-piece bonus. Next, we have Soul Harvest Languish. Soul Harvest is a key piece to this build, again because of our Sacred Harvester and our Lakumba's Ornament. Instead of stacking up to 5 times, we're stacking up to 10. That gives us a 30% intelligence buff. Not only that, the Languish rune also gives us an armor buff. At a full 10 stacks, that doubles our armor. When I have my 10 stacks up, my toughness goes from under 10 million to over 100 million. Lastly, we have Spirit Walk Jaunt. This is a great mobility skill. It can be used offensively, it can be used defensively. You can use it to get out of a tight situation, or you can use it to charge through enemies in order to progress further along, better position yourself, or get to a better group of enemies. For our passives, Spirit Vessel. This is a lifesaver. When you're pushing the higher greater rifts, having that free revive can be the difference between a failed rift and a successful rift. I try to play more aggressively when my Spirit Vessel is off cooldown, but once I've popped Spirit Vessel, I play a bit more passively and defensively until that cooldown is done. Next, we have Grave Injustice. This will help us use all of our skills much more often, which really is essential to completing these greater rifts on time. You'll note that the range of this effect, which is a mere 20 yards, is extended by items that increase your gold pickup radius. If you want to know how far 20 yards is in Diablo 3, check out this video here, and I bet you'll be surprised by the answer. Keep this skill in mind when we take a look at gear. Next, you'll want Pierce the Veil. This increases all of our damage by 20%. While it also increases our mana costs, mana is never going to be an issue with this build. That said, you could swap out Pierce the Veil for Confidence Ritual. This allows you to deal 25% more damage to enemies within 20 yards. This does require a much more aggressive and confident playstyle though. And for the most part, I don't see people topping the leaderboards with Confidence Ritual, but instead using Pierce the Veil. Lastly, we have Midnight Feast. More damage for our Gargantuans, 1 additional zombie dog, you can't go wrong. That's more damage, more life on hit. Now let's go back to our gear. The first thing we'll want to note is that wherever you can, you'll want to stack as a secondary stat a resistance and increases health and gold pickup radius. Secondary resistance gives more situational toughness, and the gold and health pickup radius again combines well with Grave Injustice, allowing us to stay a bit further away from enemies and still benefiting from that cooldown reduction. That said, there's a reason these are called secondary. Do not prioritize these over your primary stats, but your best in slot gear will have these as secondary affixes. On your shoulders, ideal stats, intelligence, vitality, gargantuan damage, and area damage. Pets do deal area damage now, and area damage is becoming a very important part of your overall damage. For your helm, intelligence, vitality, crit chance. The gem could be either a diamond for cooldown reduction or an amethyst for more life. On PTR, the Greater Rift 90s were cleared with an amethyst. Presently, all the top witch doctors are using a diamond. If you feel you can take the toughness hit, then go with a diamond. For our Traveler's Pledge, we ideally want cold damage, crit chance. Those stats are tricky to get, and you're more likely to get cold damage, intelligence, and crit damage. For your gloves, ideal stats will actually be attack speed, crit damage, crit chance, and area damage. The reason we don't even want intelligence is because at high enough paragon level, and with Caldison's Despair that allows you to add even more intelligence to an item, intelligence as a primary affix becomes less important. That said, those 4 stats can be tricky to get, so the next best thing would be intelligence, crit damage, crit chance, area damage. For your chest, intelligence, vitality, gargantuan damage. As a secondary affix here, you can get reduces damage from melee attacks instead of a secondary resistance. On your bracers, you want cold damage, intelligence, vitality, and crit chance. Your witching hour, intelligence, vitality, attack speed, crit damage. For your short man's finger, intelligence, crit damage, crit chance. For your compass rose, ideal stats are intelligence, crit damage, crit chance, area damage. Your pants, intelligence, vitality, armor. And your boots, intelligence, vitality, armor, all resist. Or if you have a secondary resist on your armor, get move speed instead. For your offhand, whether it's the cat or the snakes, you want intelligence, vitality, crit chance, gargantuan damage. And for your sacred harvester, you ideally want intelligence, area damage, life per hit. If you're feeling really ballsy, you can forgo the life per hit on this altogether, and instead roll 10% damage. That said, that's really an all-in build. That's going to really require you to fish for greater rifts, and while you'll have the potential to clear higher due to the greater damage you'll be dealing, you are completely gutting your sustain. For most people, I would advise getting life per hit. For your legendary gems, you want Bane of the Trapped. That'll give you a flat damage buff at basically all times. You'll want your Enforcer gem, again, flat damage buff, and you'll want a Bane of the Stricken. This is almost exclusively for taking out the Rift Guardian in a reasonable amount of time. This build can really slow down against Rift Guardians, so having that 25% increased damage is very important, as well as that stacking damage from every hit. For your Paragon points, ensure that your total move speed, factoring in your boots and your compass rose, as well as Paragon points, is 25%, no more, no less. Then dump everything else into intelligence. For offense, start with crit chance and crit damage. Try to keep your total critical hit chance and critical hit damage at a roughly 10-to-1 ratio. Let that determine whether you put points into crit chance or crit damage first. Odds are it'll be crit damage. Then, between attack speed and cooldown reduction is up for some debate. Attack speed results in more damage, whereas cooldown reduction allows you to pop your skills more often. For defense, start with life, then armor, then all resist. For utility, area damage, life on hit, and then resource cost reduction, although it's basically useless to this build. However, gold find is useless for greater rifts anyway. Now, we'll talk briefly about gearing your follower, as that can help tremendously for pushing these solo greater rifts. While we no longer use a double unity setup, having the relic that makes your Templar invulnerable is very important. A dead Templar is not helping you at all. For an amulet, the S of Johann will do a great job at clumping up enemies for you. Again, your gargantuans deal cleave damage, so clumped enemies are great targets. Next, we want an Oculus Ring. This is a recent change in game mechanics. Your Templar can now proc the special effect and you will benefit from it. This ring affords a chance to create an area, and if you stand in that area, you'll deal increased damage. While running through the rift, you'll be wanting to play the mini-game of spot the golden circle and stand in it as long as you can. Your pets will receive this buff. The freeze of deflection is the best shield you can give your Templar, because when he blocks, he'll have a chance of freezing the attacker for a very short duration. While crowd control is not as strong as it once was, there really isn't any better option. To combine well with the freeze of deflection, we'll want a Justice Lantern, so that the Templar is blocking more often. As for his primary weapon, I'm using the Yunjang Do right now, which used to be the best in slot back when crowd control was more powerful, and you can perma-stunlock enemies once they went below 20% health. And while it's not nearly as powerful as it once was, there aren't that many better options, although a lot of people stand by the Thunder Fury. The good thing about the Thunder Fury is that it will cause chains of lightning to travel through enemies, nerfing their attack speed and move speed, so it's certainly better at dealing with crowds, whereas the Yunjang Do is better at single target. Now, because your Templar is invulnerable and he will not be a significant source of damage, the stats on these weapons don't really matter. You'll notice that he has intelligence gear, even though he is a strength character. It really doesn't matter that much. What you do want to stack, however, is attack speed, cooldown reduction, and block chance wherever you can. This is because we want the Templar to be using all of his skills and all of the powers on his items as often as possible. As for his skills, Heal serves as a shitty healing potion, but more importantly, it can save your life. Intervene is decent as well, but I would rather move out of the way of enemies than rely on him taunting them away. His level 10 skill, Loyalty, is basically useless. That life regen will not make a difference. Whereas Intimidate applies a nice crowd control effect. At level 15, Onslaught is completely useless, so Charge is the way to go. Again, this applies some nice crowd control. And for level 20, while I would normally recommend Inspire, this build really doesn't need more mana, so Guardian serves as basically a second heal that also applies crowd control. That wraps up this guide. Thanks for watching. Leave a comment letting me know what build you're using and what Greater Rift level you've cleared. Check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Rhykker's Raiders to be notified the next time a new guide goes up.